Mary Lou Jepsen is a longtime electronics engineer and scientist who has been involved for many years. The way I first met her was when she was the chief technology officer of the One Laptop Per Child initiative that Nicholas Negroponte ran, which was so influential on a lot of things. Then she left that, and she's been at Google, she's been at Facebook. Now she runs something called Open Water, which, as you'll see, is taking some very radical approach to imaging of the human body with some extraordinary implications. Wait, what's your last name?
Singer.
Wolf Singer. Jesus, I knew his first name. Wolf Singer, and he's a really, really interesting brain scientist who has won so many awards. The list is like this. He's based in Frankfurt and Munich, both. He's at the Max Planck Institute. I hope they followed my instructions not to have too much discussion about the issues before they came on stage, because he really knows what we need to do in terms of the brain, and she's making a lot of claims about what she can do, and so I want him to ask her what she's doing in real time in front of you, and so I think that'll be great because she can take it. Whatever the answer is, she's definitely going to be able to take the whole dialogue, and I'm hoping just to watch that happen. But we're going to start with Mary Lou's going to demo what she's got and tell us a little bit, a sort of mini version of the talk she did at TED just a few weeks ago.
Cool. Yeah. So can we get the slides, please? Oh, cool. So if I throw you in an MRI scanner like that for an hour, I can tell you if you've got a tumor or some kind of disease. If I throw you in that scanner for 10 to 100 hours, as has been shown by dozens of research groups for the last decade, I can tell you what words you're about to say, what images are in your head, what you're dreaming about, whether you're in love or not, and so forth. So what I've been working on, noodling on for over a decade, is how we make that MRI machine smaller, up the resolution, and get it to read and write, to transform healthcare and to enable us to communicate with thought alone, to leapfrog over our language system. And I figured it out, which is why Steffi invited me here. And it uses red light. There's 3 keys. Number 1 is red light. And could you turn down the lights, please? Because I don't want you to see us, I want you to see the optics. So red light goes right through your hand. So does X-rays, so does a huge magnetic field, but just little lowly red light goes right through your hand, and it's everywhere. So it also goes through, I've got some chicken breast up here, which has the same optical properties as real human flesh. And I'm going to show you that the light goes right through it, too. So here's some chicken breast I brought around the corner. And here you can see the light going right through the flesh. And I also implanted a tumor in this chicken that has the same optical properties as a real tumor. Can you see the tumor? So this means using red light, we can find tumors. But there's a catch. There's another piece of chicken. You can see the red light still goes through, but you can no longer see the tumor. That's because the light scatters. So to be able to see the tumor, we have to do something about that scatter. And what we do is actually leverage a technology I spent the early part of my career on. It's called holography. This is a hologram. And holograms are amazing. Could you bring the stage lights on? Yeah, so I don't know if you can see this. Holography records all of the light at every angle, at every position, simultaneously. And so this is actually the second key to enable us to descatter that light. The first key being translucency, the second being the descattering. And to show you what we can do with holography, can I go to the next slide, please? Maybe the next slide after that. You see these marbles? Imagine they're like light. This is an analogy to light, and they're being scattered by these barriers. And at the bottom of the maze, they're going in every direction. If we record a hologram at the bottom and side of the maze, we can record the angle and position of every marble. And then we can bring in marbles from below and make them emerge as a single beam of marbles. So we're going to do that with a piece of brain that's, this is optically similar to real human brain, and this is a laser. Make a stream of light come out of that to show how we descatter. And I've got a video of it on the slide deck. So here is that brain in the center, a hologram, and a laser emerging from a brain. We made a brain laze. And you can see, I think we bring a card in front of it. It's no joke, really made a brain laze. That's pretty interesting because that means we can descatter the light. We're descattering the light in our lab. And of course, there's a big question when we do that. You're like, yeah, sure, but how do you get through bone and skull? Well, this is real human skull. Ordered it just in case anyone cares. Skullsunlimited.com. No kidding. I just thought people might ask how we got it. We treat this with great respect in our lab and here at DLD. But here is, can you turn down the lights? Here's a laser going right through. So red light also just goes through skull and bone. So we're using that fact and doing something more interesting. If we go to the next video, we are able to focus through skull and brain to the diameter of the smallest neuron known. So that first MRI machine I showed you has a resolution of about 1 millimeter. We're doing a few microns. So that sounds like 1,000 times the resolution, but that's 1,000 times in X, Y, and Z, or like a billion, which is pretty astonishing. We could actually focus finer, we can focus coarser. And so this could have profound impact to be able to right your body to deliver photodynamic therapy or find tumors of any size or any features. So this is the lab rig we built to do all of this. It's kind of big. We did this so that we could perfect our architecture, test the corner cases, and fine-tune our chip designs. I'm really a chip designer. I shipped billions of dollars worth of consumer electronics on the hairy edge of optical physics with full custom chips for a couple of decades. So we worked on this system to basically, it found tumors like this, and we scanned flesh and my dog and some other things in the lab on that table to make sure we could make this thing work. And what we're doing now is replacing that big lab setup. Each component can be replaced with a little integrated circuit, a display or camera chip the size of a child's fingernail, and a little laser. So we're putting this into either a smartphone format or a wearable that leapfrogs the resolution of a multi-million-dollar MRI machine using the as-is factory infrastructure that make the subcomponents in all smartphones today, where I've lived and breathed for decades making stuff. So there's a third key. I told you key number 1 was our translucency, light going through our hand. Key 2, holography. The other is using sonic pings. And just quickly to finish up, these 3 discs around the head represent the integrated components that we've designed that replace the big lab rig. And we send a sonic ping down into the head through the skull, and it focuses. Then we shine red light in, goes everywhere, except the light that goes through the sonic focus shifts color very slightly, like the pitch of a police car siren changing as it speeds past you, Doppler. And there's this thing about holography I haven't told you, another thing, other than the descattering. A hologram can only be made with 2 beams of exactly the same color light. So that's how we filter out all the red light and get the structural information from that spot. So we record the hologram, looks like this, and then we can optionally focus the light back down to that spot to activate that neuron or deliver therapy, and then we can move to scan out the next spot. And we do this to scan out the brain or body. We decode the images in the hologram, much like Rosalind Franklin decoded the X-ray diffraction picture imaged here to reveal the structure of DNA for the first time. So that's how we do it. It's pretty straightforward, except we do it 1,000,000 times a second. So this is a mock-up of the thing we're building that replaces an MRI, medical imaging, CAT scan, all of that. So that's it. Oh, one key thing, we can find tumors really well because we're using red light. And this is blood. It's red. It absorbs red light. This is a laser, right? You see it absorbs. This is a pound of flesh, literally a pound of flesh. It scatters the light, right? So any tumor in your body, bigger than a cubic millimeter or two, steals blood so it can grow and try to kill you. It has 5 times the amount of blood as normal flesh. So we can really see that signal quite clearly with that's my beaker of blood, just to show that light really is on, versus normal flesh. So this could be extraordinary at finding tumors early and dramatically reducing healthcare costs and enabling us to see and communicate with thought alone. So that's a brief update. Take that away.
Oh, good. We get table removal. I was hoping we'd have that. Thank you so much. So I want to just make a couple of quick points, and then I want to sort of turn it over to Wolf to ask a few questions. But that was great. And by the way, you guys actually got a little even more than the TED audience got. You added a few things that I thought were very well said. And I think there was an additional slide, but maybe I just didn't watch the TED thing close enough. But anyway, so I think of what Mary Lou's doing as having 3 fundamental elements of significance. Obviously, she's very much emphasizing, and it's extremely exciting and has generated a lot of discussion and controversy, the implications on the brain and reading the brain. But really, this can be used in any part of the body, and it's basically a way, way cheaper way to just do MRIs generally, or something equivalent for diagnostic purposes, which in itself is extremely potentially, and less controversially, groundbreaking and could be hugely influential on human health. Then the third thing that is relevant and really pertinent to that last point is that for the world writ large, which is 7.5 billion people or whatever, so many of whom have access to virtually no medical care and certainly no medical imaging with affordable access, it could really be a game changer to enable people around the world to really have access to diagnostic tools that are simply not there or not affordable. And that's a very big deal. Okay, so I just wanted to make sure that everybody, those are 3 important things. But Wolf is a brain scientist, and I would love, if you could start, Wolf, you said to me the challenge that you all face as brain scientists in trying to understand imaging the brain. Oh, I thought I was coming through, but anyway. Reiterate that what you said to me earlier about what the challenge is that needs to be solved.
Well, the challenge for us is to have non-invasive methods that would have a spatial and temporal resolution comparable to our invasive methods. We all continue to use... Are we not online?
I don't know, I can't hear you very well.
Okay. We are still forced, all of us, to use animal models in order to do our research because we need the activity of individual neurons at a real-time temporal resolution. This can only be done so far with electrodes or with invasive optical methods. We can see the activity of neurons if we put some dyes in there which fluoresce when the neuron gets excited. Also, the methods that we have available in the moment, the MRI, in order to get the functional MRI, the magnetoencephalography, and even worse, the electroencephalography, they have a very, very poor spatial resolution. Structurally, with MRI, we can get down to a voxel, which is the pixel that we can resolve, is about a cubic centimeter or so. It's not much better than that. Concerning function...
How many neurons would be in that?
A couple of millions, probably.
Right.
The temporal resolution when we want to get at the activity with fMRI is very, very bad, because what we actually measure is the change in the oxygenation level of the blood that is supplying the neurons. That has a lag time of about 4 seconds after activity has raised, oxygenation increases. So we look at very indirectly at a signal that reflects somehow activity. We get real-time activity from magnetoencephalography and from electroencephalography, the EEG. But the spatial resolution is a disaster. We cannot reconstruct properly the sources of this activity because the brain is a volume conductor and it just conducts. So a dream would become true if we had non-invasive methods that would allow us to analyze the human brain with the precision with which we can now analyze animal brains. Because with an animal, if you want to make a relation between neuronal activity and behavior, you have to train them. You have to work with awake behaving monkeys. That takes you half a year in order...
And you put things in their brain. You stick things in their brain.
You implant...
Most people wouldn't want that, I think.
There's, you know, the debates. It's a highly controversial topic. We implant devices surgically in full anesthesia, as in the operation theater in clinics. And then we can record, after the implant has healed in, activity from within the brain with the resolution that we require. And we can also stimulate the brain. Now, if we could do the same thing with human subjects, and it is actually possible in the context of surgery, human subjects suffering from chronic epilepsy that cannot be treated pharmacologically sometimes have the focus of this epileptic seizure removed surgically, and that helps. But in order to do this, you have to locate the source of this seizure very, very precisely. And this can only be done, again, invasively. So here would be another application of your method if it works, and I will ask you questions afterwards. So that one has to localize with the precision of a few millimeters the source of the seizure. And this can only be done in the moment by implanting electrodes into the human brain, record from the neurons and see where the focus is. And we use this activity while the patients wait for their seizures to happen, which is important for the surgeon. We can take activity out of human brains. But obviously we cannot determine where we want to get the activity from. We can't implant electrodes as we want to have them. So if this method works, that would be a real breakthrough. And here come a few questions.
Okay.
So I haven't seen yet a picture that would be comparable to an MRI picture, a structural picture of the human brain. Have you ever tried that? How does it look like? I mean, theoretically, I think it's possible, and I understood what you do.
Right.
But
so what I was showing was tumors, so with blood is where we've started. But we're also identifying neurons directly. So we can write neurons and read them. And we can read them because a pulse, an electrical pulse as it goes down a neuron. Everybody's focused on electronics. I was an electrical engineer. I started that, but I also did optics. And optics actually precedes the electrical pulse because the ion channels around the membrane of a neuron roughen. And when a membrane roughens, it's a bit like if I took sandpaper to my glasses here. That would be called scatter. And so we can see the differential scattering of the neurons. Yeah. We can also use the sonic pings to write them and of course light in the infrared, where we don't have to do the optogenetics that you referred to before with adding proteins. So, and we're focusing through the tissue. We're using it right now. We're building up our chips to speed up the system. And so we'll have developer kits in about a year and production in 2 years because we're leveraging the consumer electronics supply chain. That's what's really different for medical. I mean, right now, MRIs, like 2,000 of them ship a year, and they're these 2-ton magnets, and you know, how do you innovate on that? That's like 20% better every 7 years. So the big idea is to leverage the consumer electronics supply chain as is. The very fabs that make all the subcomponents in your smartphones and TVs and laptops.
So use the volumes and economies of scale to really compete with something that's currently millions of dollars.
Yeah, I mean, I was a professor at MIT. I gave up my labs at MIT after 1 laptop per child because I thought, you know, the best thing I could do in my labs at MIT, paled in comparison to using the $12 billion fab in Sakai that Sharp had for making LCDs. And I was just hooked, you know, like rather than normally people use this part of the process window, I could move it over here for one process and the next process and build these things in like 3 months and then ship 1 million of them 6 months later.
Yeah.
And that was pretty addictive for impact on the world.
Well, I can certainly see the value for the structural analysis. This will work for sure. I'm still a little bit skeptical concerning the function. So you don't rely on the blood oxygenation signal?
Oh, we use blood. So blood changes color. So the absorption of oxygenated blood or hemoglobin
so you can use that as well.
Peaks at like 750 nanometers, which is closer to red. Like actually when you bleed, it looks redder than when it dries,
yeah.
kind of. The color change of blood, oxy-deoxy, yeah, we get that. But we can also get structural information because we're descattering the light and we can see the structural boundary changes. The biggest signal by far is blood. Blood gets you a lot pretty far. And then...
but do you think you can capture the diffraction signal that occurs when there's a structural change, when the ion channels change the conformation, when the intercellular space changes? Because that would give you a real-time signal, and that would
and
be
we
really...
do that. We're doing microsecond frame times on our camera chips, which are every single person in this room, in this city, in this country has had the pixel size on the smartphones that's necessary for this. It's like a trickle down of Moore's law, like hitting the lowly LCD and camera fabs, which I work in, where the pixel size is the wavelength of light, which means you can record the waves in the wavelength of light, which is what holography enables. The problem is it's too slow, because everybody wants 60 frames, 120 frames per second, and we're alive. That means, you know, it's good to be alive, but we move, we breathe, that's good. The blood moves, and so we're taking each image in a microsecond, so the blood doesn't move in the microsecond, so we get a crisp signal. That ends up being really simple to do in a layout of a camera chip, because you do the on-chip decoding with just a FFT on a Fourier. Sorry, that's probably too technical. You do what Rosalind O'Franklin did with the X-ray diffraction, which is a Fourier transform. But but we just do it fast. Yeah,
we know from in vitro work, so if we have tissue, brain tissue under the microscope, that we can see activity in change of the diffraction. If you use double interference microscopy, you can see it, so you can pick up that signal. Have you done it already? Have you seen live neurons, action potentials or something similar?
We have a postdoc that's done it, and we've focused her on other things, and we're going to let her go. But actually, she's not. She's a full-time employee. Sorry, she was an intern. And anyway, so yes, we're going to get back to that. We were focused on building the rig for priority startups, but yes, that's where we want to go as we.
But your dream is brain reading. That's at least something I read somewhere.
I think, don't we want to know how it works? There's profound legal and ethical issues, but we could say and it's interesting talking to you, we could say we don't want to go there. We don't want to know how our brains work.
Yeah.
Do we really not want to go? Because then we're going to know how, and we're going to be able to read information out of our brains.
I wanted to ask you both something, because one of the things that, because I've known Mary Lou quite a while, and we've talked about it at Techonomy on stage and elsewhere, one of the things people don't really initially grok about how this thing would work is that it's entirely dependent on cloud infrastructure, basically. So the idea that it's all pattern matching, right? That if we can really, we do what she says we can do, which is read the brain and understand thoughts, it will be because essentially enough people's brains have been imaged using this, and you know what they were thinking at the time was recorded by whatever means, and that was all stored at scale with large numbers. And then, at least what I believe you have said to me before is that, you know, somebody down the road could be wearing one of your hats, and oh, that's the same, you know, then you shoot it up into the cloud and you pattern match it with like 500,000 people who've been thinking about white boxes or whatever, and you say, oh, that person's thinking about a white box.
Or maybe you don't compare it. Maybe you just have your own data set.
Okay, that's
how you do it is different,
I wonder if
it's the machine learning AI you do have to apply to it.
So it would probably be against your own data? In other words, you wouldn't know what I was thinking unless I'd let you figure out what I was thinking over many years before that, or kind of thing?
The data that we have with what's been done with graduate students in neuroscience, primarily, lying in MRI machines for hundreds of hours, shows there's great similarity between the brains of graduate students in neuroscience.
Okay, because this is something he wanted to ask you about. Am I right? I mean, Whether you, because you said, what do you think about the idea, let's say if it wasn't the same person? Do you think, I mean, is it your belief, because you just said that they're similar, that we could probably infer from what one person's thinking or from what 100,000 people were thinking, what the 100,001th person is thinking?
Whether we do that with the data set from the person or collecting, I think, is to be determined. We're making a better tool. We can't disambiguate the tool that sees in our bodies from the brain. So that's why we're talking about both of them. The machine learning AI portion seems obvious how you do it ethically. I read GDPR last week, the standard that's going in place. They talk about freedom of thought. They don't talk about the penalty for violating freedom of thought, but you know, how we do this will be formed by how we decide it's okay to do it.
Well, obviously you think there's a real possibility that random forces could potentially read other people's brains down the road based on this kind of, because you have said on stage at Techonomy, you were concerned about what you just said, that, you know, evil governments might be able to figure out what their citizens were thinking. I mean, that isn't out of the question in your mind, correct?
Yeah.
That's why we're talking about it. Our systems will only work consensually. You know, there's like four questions. Like, can the police make you wear this thing? If you assume that it will happen. I assume it's going to happen a lot faster than probably most of you in the room. The good news is it's not an implant. You can take it off. But can the police make you wear this? Can the military? Can your spouse? Can you put it on your child?
I love the spouse example. Okay.
I think the answer is no to all of those,
well,
but you can choose to. But with children, maybe not, right? Or with your spouse, you can choose to do what you want to do. But
okay, well,
Well, I would challenge some of these ideas, because there's so much epigenetic shaping of the brain function that every individual brain is very differently organized from any other brain.
Sure.
So with a multivariate technique, you can certainly find out, if you stick with the same brain and make a tight correlation between mental activity and brain activity, establish correlations. And I think what for the moment we can do quite well is find out whether the subject is employing his visual system or auditory system or whatever sensory modality.
with a centimeter resolution.
What the feeling is, whether he's emotionally active or drowsy or
what
positive or negative
image
feelings.
they're thinking, or what they've dreamt of, which has been shown with fMRI resolution finer than the 10 cubic, than the centimeter voxel, but 10 cubic millimeter, which is higher resolution. But we're talking about much higher resolution and getting the neuron states themselves at microsecond
But
level.
whether you get at the semantics...
So this is a tool that allows tremendous more data. It's the tools of our time, right? Big data, machine learning, and consumer electronics to enable us to create a tool to see inside of our bodies, and applying that, whether we share the brains or not. I think there's ethical issues of sharing the brains in the cloud, and we may choose just single brain, and it'll be like Dragon Naturally Speaking from the 90s, you know, to get it if anybody was around then.
Unfortunately, and I thought we were going to have time for audience questions. What did I know? We run out of time, but I think this is a really good discussion. And the thing that I think is so interesting, I mean, he's so interesting. We didn't even touch the surface of all the things he can talk about, but thank you for participating in this, Wolf. But the thing about what Mary Lou's doing that's so interesting is really you've kind of like jumped disciplines in a way. I mean, well, you always have been a disciplined jumper, but it's so interesting to think of somebody who started out doing display technology who's now thinking about what some of the same physics and optics could mean in medicine and imaging the brain. And I just, that's something that innovation does in particularly the American ecosystem. So we're very happy that it's happening. And thank you, Mary Lou. Thank you, Wolf.
Thank you.